During a robbery at the mansion, a young maid saves the millionaire's son without a second thought. While the intruders searched for something specific, she risked everything to keep him hidden. Days later, when watching the cameras, the CEO is shocked to discover the truth. The night the Preston mansion was invaded, Olivia Ramirez was in the kitchen washing the last dinner dishes. Wind rattled the tall windows, and distant thunder mixed with the echo of voices from upstairs. The routine of the house always followed the same rhythm. Silent luxury, hurried orders, expensive perfume permeating the corridors. But that night, something was different. The family's boy, the only son of a business empire owner, had secretly come down to the kitchen seeking refuge from the oppressive environment he lived in. Mason Preston was only 12, but his eyes carried a restrained fear that Olivia recognized immediately. It was the same look she saw in her mother when the boss came home late, exuding power and coldness. Before she could ask what he was doing there, the sound of breaking glass echoed through the main hall. Olivia instinctively turned off the lights. Muffled screams and hurried footsteps spread throughout the mansion. Her heart raced. Without thinking, she grabbed the boy by the hand and pushed him under the large wooden table, covered by a thick tablecloth that hung to the floor. "Stay quiet and don't come out for anything," she whispered, trying to control the tremor in her voice. He obeyed without question. From the other side of the door, metallic noises and aggressive orders revealed the presence of armed men. They were intruders, but Olivia quickly realized this wasn't a common break-in. The men seemed to know exactly where to look, which drawers to open, which safes to force. Everything indicated someone inside had planned the attack. Hidden, she watched Mason clutch a small medallion between his fingers. He seemed more terrified by what he knew than by what he saw. Time dragged on in tense silence until heavy footsteps echoed near the kitchen. One of the men opened the door, illuminating the room with the beam of a flashlight. Olivia held her breath. The intruder walked slowly, rummaged through drawers, opened cabinets, and for a moment stopped beside the table. The boy, under the tabletop, pulled his knees to his chest. The man sighed, muttered something about not wasting time here, and left. Only when the sound of footsteps was lost in the hallway did Olivia dare to breathe again. From upstairs a scream was heard, a female voice begging for help, followed by a sharp sound. Mason curled up even more. Olivia pulled him carefully, taking him to the pantry. "We need to get out of here," she said, determined. Her mother was somewhere in the house, and the instinct to protect her fought against the paralyzing fear. However, hearing the boy's muffled crying, she understood that her priority had changed. He was the target. These men didn't just want money, they were looking for something he represented, perhaps a secret, perhaps the heir himself. Through a narrow corridor leading to the back, the two advanced blindly. The mansion, once a symbol of wealth and stability, was now a labyrinth of shadows and ruin. They passed through the laundry room and the service stairs, where the smell of smoke was already spreading. Fire was beginning to consume the upper floor. Olivia pushed open a window, helped Mason out, and fell behind him onto the garden wet with drizzle. Outside, the chaos was muffled, as if the world had stopped. They ran to the staff quarters, a simple building at the back of the property. Inside, Olivia's mother, Eleanor, pale and injured, was trying to get up. "They know who he is," she said weakly. "They want him gone. The boss discovered things he shouldn't have." Before she could explain more, she collapsed. Olivia understood enough. The boy was more than a rich child. He was the key to something dangerous, perhaps a corporate secret, perhaps an inheritance many wanted erased. With her mother unconscious and the intruders taking over the house, Olivia decided to act. She used her maid's uniform to blend in with the surrendered staff, waited for the right moment, and escaped through the back, carrying the boy hidden under a blanket. They walked through dark alleys to the outskirts of New York City, where no one would recognize a millionaire heir or a maid without documents. Each step was a mixture of fear and courage. While seeking shelter, Mason revealed that before the attack, he'd overheard a conversation between his stepmother Veronica and a stranger. They were talking about documents, companies, and a transfer of control. His father, Robert Preston, gravely ill, was about to change his will. The invasion had been orchestrated to prevent this. He still carried his father's medallion, inside which was a small golden key. "My father said it unlocks the truth," he told her, not understanding the meaning. Olivia realized that, unwittingly, she had become the guardian of the heir and a secret worth fortunes. Now the two were alone, hunted by powerful people, not knowing whom to trust. Her mother, hospitalized in critical condition, could be used as bait. The police, controlled by those who commanded the family's fortune, believed the official version, that the boy had been kidnapped by disgruntled employees. With each news broadcast, Olivia's image appeared as a wanted criminal. Hidden in a cheap boarding house on the outskirts of the city, she planned their next move. Mason wanted to go back to recover the will. She knew that would be suicide. Together, they decided to look for someone who could decipher what was behind the key. It was during one of these searches that Olivia discovered something even more disturbing. The woman who occupied the role of Mason's stepmother wasn't just a cold, calculating figure. She was, in fact, a former employee of his father's company, fired years before, after an internal scandal that the businessman himself had hushed up to avoid damaging the company's image. She had returned with a new identity, disguised, climbing the hierarchy until she married the boss, already weakened by illness. Since then, she had been manipulating decisions, isolating the boy, and silently reorganizing the future of the company. She was fired from Preston Technologies 5 years ago, whispered Jake Thompson, a former security guard who had agreed to help them. The three huddled in a corner booth of a dingy diner in Queens. Back then she was known as Valerie Reed, head of pharmaceutical research. There was a hushed scandal about experimental drugs. Your father protected the company, but she was furious when he let her go. Mason's hands trembled around his hot chocolate. Valerie Reed is my stepmother. That's impossible. Dad would have recognized her. Jake shook his head. Facial reconstruction surgery, new identity papers. She came back as Veronica Ross, started in human resources and worked her way up. By the time she got close to your father, he was already showing symptoms of his illness. Olivia saw the pieces clicking into place. The medallion. What does it open? Not what, Mason said softly, turning the golden object in his palm. Where? Dad always said it would lead to the heart of Preston Technologies. I thought he was being poetic. Jake's eyes widened. The executive vault. There's a safe behind your father's portrait in the main boardroom. Company legend says only the CEO can access it. That's why they need him gone, Olivia realized. With Robert incapacitated and Mason missing, Veronica would have complete control as the grieving widow. They decided to contact Dr. Samuel Wilson, Robert's personal physician and longtime friend. Meeting in a crowded cafe for safety, the doctor confirmed their worst fears. Robert's condition deteriorated too rapidly for his diagnosis, Dr. Wilson explained, keeping his voice low. I requested independent testing of his medication when I noticed anomalies in his blood work, but the results were intercepted. Someone has been tampering with his treatment. My stepmother, Mason said, his young face hardened with understanding. I can't prove it, Dr. Wilson replied, but I've been secretly working on an antidote. If we can administer it soon, there's hope for recovery. As they left the cafe, Olivia noticed a black sedan parked across the street. The same car had been outside the boarding house that morning. We've been tracked, she whispered to Jake. They slipped through the back exit, hearts pounding. That night, as Mason slept fitfully in their new hiding place, a small apartment above a Chinese restaurant owned by Jake's cousin, Olivia examined the medallion. The intricate design featured the Preston family crest and a series of numbers that seemed like a code. She couldn't help but wonder what secrets were so valuable that someone would destroy a family to protect them, and how could she, a kitchen maid, hope to outsmart people with unlimited resources? With the help of the former security guard Jake, they gained access to an old encrypted laptop belonging to Robert Preston. The laptop contained files that could only be accessed using the key from Mason's medallion. Olivia's hand shook as she inserted the tiny golden key into a custom USB port, disguised as a standard input. The screen illuminated with a video file. This is my insurance policy. Robert's face appeared, haggard but determined. If you're watching this, Mason, it means my suspicions were correct. I've discovered widespread corruption within Preston Technologies' board of directors. Several members, led by Chief Operations Officer Gerald Harmon, have been secretly testing unstable compounds on unwitting patients in developing countries. The financial records I've uncovered show millions diverted to offshore accounts. Mason gripped Olivia's arm, his eyes wide with shock. The video continued as Robert detailed how he had been gathering evidence for months, preparing to clean house at the next shareholders' meeting. Then came the revelation that made Olivia gasp. "I've also discovered that Veronica is not who she claims to be. Facial recognition software confirmed my suspicions. She's Valerie Reed, the research director I was forced to terminate after she proposed using human test subjects without consent protocols. She's returned for revenge and control of the company." The video showed medical charts, Robert's own, with annotations highlighting inconsistencies in his treatment plan. "My sudden illness is no coincidence. The experimental treatment Veronica convinced me to try contains traces of compounds that slowly deteriorate organ function, creating symptoms identical to Bergman's syndrome, which runs in my family. It's the perfect cover. By the time anyone realizes, it will be too late." Mason sobbed quietly beside her. Jake, watching from across the room, let out a low whistle. "There's more," Robert continued. "I've changed my will, removing Veronica as beneficiary and blocking her access to Mason's trust fund. The new documents are with my attorney, James Foster, but I fear Foster may be compromised. He suddenly cancelled our meeting and has been unreachable. The digital copy of the will is in the executive vault, accessible only with this key and my biometric signature." Robert's face softened as he addressed his son directly. "Mason, I'm so sorry to place this burden on you. Find someone you can trust. The password to access the full files is your mother's maiden name, followed by the date we visited the Grand Canyon. Your happiest memory, you told me." The screen went black. The three sat in stunned silence before Mason whispered, "Kennedy 0723. The files unlocked, revealing extensive documentation of board meeting minutes, secret financial transactions, and damning emails. "We need to take this to the authorities," Jake said, scrolling through the evidence. "Not yet," Olivia countered. "The police report already labels me as Mason's kidnapper. Veronica has powerful connections. We need leverage first." They decided their next step would be to find James Foster, the attorney. Using Jake's contacts, they discovered he had suddenly taken a vacation to his cabin in the Catskills, a vacation no one at his firm knew about. The trip upstate was tense, with Olivia constantly checking for followers. The mountain roads wound through dense forest, isolating them from the city's chaos, but also from help if needed. When they finally reached the remote cabin, they found Foster anxious and paranoid. "I've been expecting someone," he admitted, after they convinced him of their identities. Though not a 12-year-old and his supposed kidnapper. His nervous laugh did little to ease the tension. "Mr. Preston's new will. Do you have it?" Olivia asked directly. Foster nodded, hidden where they wouldn't think to look. "I knew something was wrong when Robert insisted on the secret changes. Then Veronica started calling daily for updates on his mental state. When news broke about the home invasion and Mason's kidnapping, I connected the dots and disappeared." He retrieved a sealed envelope from inside a hollowed-out copy of Moby Dick on his bookshelf. "The original is here, but without Robert's testimony about Veronica's true identity and the board's corruption, it may not be enough to protect Mason's inheritance." "We have his testimony," Mason said, producing the laptop. As Foster reviewed the files, his legal mind cataloging the evidence, his expression shifted from concern to determination. "This changes everything," he said, "but we still face a powerful enemy. Preston Technologies has a security force that rivals small armies, and the board members implicated in these documents control billions in assets. They won't surrender without a fight." The New York skyline glittered through the hospital window as Dr. Wilson administered the experimental antidote to Robert Preston. The CEO's private room, secured under a false name, had become their temporary command center. Olivia stood watch by the door, while Mason held his father's hand. "How long until we know if it's working?" the boy asked, his voice small in the monitor-filled room. "Hours, maybe days," Dr. Wilson replied. "The compounds in his system are complex, but I've analyzed the formula Veronica was using. It was designed to mimic Bergman's syndrome while slowly incapacitating him. Quite brilliant, actually, in a disturbing way." Jake entered with Foster, both carrying coffee cups and grim expressions. "Security just doubled in the lobby," Jake reported. "Someone knows we're here." Foster placed a laptop on the table. "I've prepared emergency petitions for guardianship of Mason and control of Preston Technologies. Once Robert shows signs of recovery and can testify about Veronica's deception, we can file them immediately." "It won't be that simple," came a new voice from the doorway. They turned to see Elena Ramirez, Olivia's mother, in a wheelchair pushed by a nurse. Her arm was in a cast, but her eyes were sharp and alert. "Veronica just announced to the press that Preston Technologies has developed a groundbreaking treatment for Bergman's syndrome, dedicating it to her beloved husband, who suffers from the disease." "She's covering her tracks," Olivia realized. "If the actual disease symptoms match what she's been causing with the fake medication, she'll be hailed as a hero instead of exposed as a poisoner." "There's more," Eleanor continued as the nurse helped her to a chair. "The board has called an emergency session tomorrow morning to vote on restructuring the company leadership, citing Robert's permanent incapacitation as cause." Mason clutched his father's medallion. "She can't do that. Dad left evidence that only matters if we can present it properly," Foster mused. "We need leverage, something immediate and public that forces their hand." Dr. Wilson's phone chimed. He checked it, his expression brightening. "The latest blood tests show the toxin levels are decreasing. The antidote is working." Hope flickered across the room, but Jake remained practical. "Robert won't be well enough to appear at tomorrow's board meeting. Even with this progress, we're talking days of recovery, not hours." Olivia paced the room, thinking aloud. "What if we don't need Robert physically present? The medallion key accesses the executive vault, which contains backup evidence. If we could get into the Preston Technologies headquarters—" "Impossible," Jake interjected. "Security has been tripled since the mansion incident. Every entrance is monitored." "Not every entrance," Elena said quietly. All eyes turned to her. "The service tunnels. The original building had underground passages for deliveries and maintenance. When they renovated 10 years ago, most were sealed off, but the staff still uses one section to move between buildings without going outside in bad weather. I cleaned those offices for 15 years. I know every inch of those tunnels." A plan began to form. Using Elena's knowledge of the tunnels, Jake's security expertise, and Foster's legal acumen, they would infiltrate Preston Technologies during the board meeting. Their goal: access the executive vault, retrieve the evidence, and expose Veronica and the corrupt board members in real time. "It's too dangerous," Olivia protested when Mason insisted on joining them. "You should stay here with your father." The boy stood his ground. "The vault requires Preston DNA for biometric verification, and I'm the only one who can properly use the medallion key. Dad designed it to respond to my fingerprints too. You need me." As they finalized their strategy, Dr. Wilson pulled Olivia aside. "There's something you should know. I've been analyzing the components of the toxin used on Robert. It's remarkably similar to an experimental compound developed 5 years ago by Preston Technologies' pharmaceutical division, the same division Valerie Reed headed before her dismissal. The scandal that got her fired," Olivia murmured. "Exactly. But the company records from that period have been purged. If we could find those original research files, they would provide irrefutable proof of the connection between Valerie Reed and Veronica's poisoning scheme." "Where would those files be kept?" Olivia asked. "That's the problem. They were supposedly destroyed during the internal investigation." "But knowing Robert—" "He would have kept a copy," Mason interrupted, having overheard their conversation. "In the vault. Dad never destroyed important information, no matter how damaging. He said knowledge was power, even dangerous knowledge." The morning of the board meeting dawned with grey skies threatening rain, fitting weather for what they were about to attempt. Olivia adjusted Mason's tie in the service elevator that would take them to the underground tunnels of Preston Technologies. The boy was dressed in an expensive suit borrowed from Foster's nephew, looking every inch the heir to an empire. "Remember," Jake cautioned, checking his watch, "we have exactly 20 minutes between security rotations. Elena will disable the tunnel cameras for 3 minutes only. That's our window to get from the maintenance entrance to the executive elevator." Elena, monitoring the security feed remotely from Dr. Wilson's office at the hospital, gave them the signal through their earpieces. Cameras going dark. Now. They moved swiftly through the dim concrete passages, Jake leading, Olivia keeping Mason close, Foster bringing up the rear with a briefcase of legal documents. The air smelled of industrial cleaner and damp stone. When they reached the executive elevator, Mason pressed his palm to the hidden biometric scanner, disguised as a maintenance panel. "Preston DNA recognized," announced a soft automated voice as the wall slid open to reveal a private elevator. The ascent to the executive floor was silent, each lost in thought. When the doors opened, they found themselves in a luxurious hallway lined with portraits of Preston company leaders through generations. Robert's image hung at the end, stern, powerful, visionary. "The boardroom is in session," Jake whispered, checking his phone where Elena had sent the building's schedule. "Veronica is presenting the leadership transition plan right now." "Perfect," Foster said. "The vault first, then we make our entrance." Mason led them to his father's portrait. Behind it, as Jake had described, was a wall safe with both a keyhole and another biometric scanner. The boy inserted the golden key from his medallion and placed his hand on the scanner. The vault door swung open silently. Inside were rows of digital storage devices, paper documents, and a single laptop, older than current models but clearly well maintained. Mason booted it up and entered the password his father had shared in the video. "There!" Olivia pointed to a folder marked Reed Pharmaceutical Investigation, Classified. Inside were damning documents, research protocols signed by Valerie Reed, authorizing untested compounds on patients without consent, financial records showing millions in kickbacks, and most crucially, chemical formulas for the experimental drugs, formulas identical to the toxins found in Robert Preston's bloodstream. The screen filled with files, each meticulously labeled and dated. "We have everything," Foster said, copying the files to a secure drive. Now for Phase 2. The boardroom doors were imposing, rich mahogany with brass handles bearing the Preston crest. Jake positioned himself on one side, Foster on the other. Olivia straightened Mason's tie one last time and whispered, "Ready?" The boy nodded, his eyes resolute beyond his years. "For my father." They threw open the doors together. Inside, Veronica Preston stood at the head of a long table, mid-presentation, surrounded by board members in expensive suits. Her perfectly manicured hand froze above a projected chart showing the company's new leadership structure, with her name at the top. "Mason," she gasped, genuine shock breaking through her composed facade. Then, recovering quickly with a practiced smile, "Oh, thank goodness you're safe. Everyone, my stepson has returned." "Save it, Valerie," Mason said clearly, his voice echoing in the suddenly silent room. "Or should I call you Dr. Reed?" The color drained from Veronica's face. The board members exchanged confused glances. Foster stepped forward. "Ladies and gentlemen of the board, I'm James Foster, counsel to Robert Preston. I'm here to inform you that your CEO is recovering from deliberate poisoning orchestrated by this woman, formerly known as Valerie Reed, the research director fired for ethical violations 5 years ago." "This is preposterous," growled Gerald Harmon, the COO implicated in Robert's video. "Security." "I wouldn't," Jake advised, blocking the doorway. "The FBI is already receiving copies of all the evidence as we speak, courtesy of Dr. Wilson." Olivia placed the laptop on the conference table and pressed play. Robert Preston's face appeared on the main screen, delivering his testimony about the corruption, the poisoning, and Veronica's true identity. "That's clearly doctored," Veronica snapped, but her confidence was cracking. "Robert has been delirious for weeks." "Not anymore," came a new voice from the doorway. Robert Preston, pale but standing, leaned on Dr. Wilson's arm. A gasp swept through the room. "The treatment you've been giving me has been neutralized, Valerie. It's over." Mason ran to his father, embracing him carefully. Robert kept his gaze fixed on his wife. "You were brilliant, you know," he said softly. "Your research could have helped thousands. Instead, you chose revenge." "You destroyed my career," she hissed, dropping all pretense. "Everything I worked for, gone with one signature, because you were willing to sacrifice innocent lives for profit," Robert countered. "Just as you were willing to sacrifice mine." He turned to the stunned board members. "Those of you who worked with her, who took the offshore payments, your resignations on my desk by end of day, or face prosecution. As security personnel, the real Preston Technologies security, not Veronica's hired men, entered to escort the implicated board members and Veronica from the room. Robert pulled Olivia aside. "My son tells me you saved his life," he said simply. "There is no adequate way to thank you." Olivia thought of her mother, now recovering in the best medical suite money could provide, of the scholarship Robert had already arranged for her, of the truth that had nearly been buried forever. "Just make it count," she replied. "Make the company what it should be." Robert nodded, understanding. "We will rebuild together, with honesty and integrity this time." He placed a hand on Mason's shoulder. All of us. Outside the Preston Technologies tower, rain had given way to patches of sunlight breaking through clouds, a new beginning washing clean the shadows of the past.